Today we're on the backside of the Birmingham Airport at the Air Force Museum. And looking at some of these old planes kind of makes me think a little bit about Alabama and its relevance in World War II. You know, even before Alabama was a state, you know, the rich, fertile lands and all the natural resources that the state had to offer made us such a lucrative position, and the people of Alabama couldn't be more amazing. But before World War II, Alabama was not a stranger to war. I mean, we had so many. There were the Native Americans had their wars before we got here, and then we got into war with them, and we got into war with ourselves, and next thing you know, World War I happened, and even after World War I, Alabama kind of stayed a depressed state.
Exactly. You know, all the way through after the 20s, even after the stock market crash in the 20s, all the way up until the early 40s. And if you look at our Coke oven video, you'll see that we were still in depression when all of that happened. You know, and to recover from the depression in the 20s after the stock market crash in 29, we were still recovering from that when the World War II happened. And it wasn't until World War II that we started getting back on our feet a little bit. You know, and the thing about the poverty that was already here, how they talked about how the Alabamians didn't even know that we were in a depression, and that's because that we were already in such poverty. We were the worst state in the union as far as poverty went. That Fortune magazine sent a reporter down here just to do a report on how bad the poverty was in Alabama. Did a whole article on it about let us praise these famous men.
Alabama really wasn't in such bad shape. We were excellent farmers. Yeah. Our chief export was agriculture. That's what Alabama was. It was an agricultural state. So from Alabama's founding, when Alabama was just a territory, it was the territory was created for the growth of cotton. Right up until the war started, Alabama families were growing everything they needed.
Right.
And it was a barter system. Yeah, no one had cash money, but you don't need cash money when a gallon of milk will get you 2 dozen eggs.
Right. You can just...
So the barter system was working real well for our families, and you were trading to get what you needed during that time. Now, 1939, Adolf Hitler gets up and decides, you know, hey, I want to be leader of the world, you know. Trying to tell his people how wonderful things are and just lying out the side of his mouth. The United States did a great job of not getting involved in this war.
They tried to.
The one thing that the United States did not want to do was get involved in another world war. The repercussions of the First World War caused a massive stock market collapse.
Right.
On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese emperor at the time thought that his best strategy would be to go ahead and just try and claim Hawaii.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
And that was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And of course, you know, the president at the time said, well, I guess we have no choice but to go to war now.
Right, so that's when Roosevelt and them said, okay, it's time for mobilization, guys. So let's start getting our states and everything ready to go to war.
So now switching from peacetime to wartime is no easy task. Because you have to remember, we're a bunch of farmers in Alabama. And most everything we have is based on agriculture. Anything that we did have in the state of Alabama up until the Civil War was destroyed. So at this time, Alabama had to mobilize, start getting things ready to go.
America prepares. All America alters its pattern of life and work to meet the demand for protection. Industry is a double step to supply the sinews of safety, the armaments of war that an embattled world must have if democracy is to survive.
It was amazing how fast the people of Alabama did this very swift transformation
Right.
to
Mobilization.
industry. Yes.
Yes. First, they started with the factories. First, we're going to start utilizing factories, right? It makes common sense. Just start taking factories that are making just household products and start turning those factories into making bandages for the soldiers, or start making supplies for the soldiers that are going to war. So then you took these plants, the iron plants and stuff that were making iron, and we started using those to make machinery and weapons for the military.
But you know, if your plan, if what you made at that time was, you know, toasters, you had to take and totally revamp that from making toasters to missiles.
Right.
And if you had, if you were a food maker, you had to actually industrialize your food process, because now you're making
MREs.
Right, items that the soldiers can carry, stuff that has to last. You have to have a different type of packaging system.
And something else I found out that was interesting, you know, the American Red Cross was doing bandages and things like that, but the women that weren't enlisted, that wasn't working in the factories, you know, what they were doing at home was gathering cloth and stuff like that and making packages, and they were making bandages, and they were making care packets and things like that, just to go help the war effort.
Right, and by 1939, you know, the Nazis were making some real progress in European countries. They became a significant threat to Russia. The U.S. really wasn't involved in the war at that time, but the U.S. was getting prepared for a lot of things. We were supporting our allies at that time, even though we were trying. The United States at that time was doing our best to France our way out of this. Because you have to remember, we just got out of World War I, massive depression, which most of the people in this state had no idea that we had one of them there depressions going on.
No, we didn't know we were in depression, because that's the way it was. That was just their standard of living, was farming. And compared to the rest of the country, it seemed like that was poverty level. So when it hit, we were kind of like, well, it's just everyday living.
All of that changed in December
1941,
the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now, even though we had been making all of these changes, getting ready for what could possibly happen and supporting our allies, we were in full swing with this war, and we were already months behind in production of what we needed to be successful in this campaign. Another very large area that we had to overcome was the labor shortages. And it's not like today. Let's walk in here.
Yeah, that's the memorial.
And this is a World War II memorial.
Yes.
And this right here.
These are all veterans and soldiers. If you walk around here, these are all veterans. See, this is World War I. It has each war and the veterans from this area that were involved in that. It's very beautiful. See, that's Korea and Vietnam, Lebanon. And you can look on here and see if like any of your family members from here were in there. See? So they're very interesting.
You know, and one of the issues is we're looking at these names. Most of these men that are listed on here were of fighting age.
Yes.
So they were drafted into the military. That's why there was such a labor shortage. Now, during World War II, there was still a lot of discrimination out there. Certain people were not allowed to serve the way everyone else could serve. There was all these restrictions. Thankfully, women and anyone that was not drafted into war, the people that stayed home, did an excellent job of pulling together and filling in the gaps of those labor shortages.
Right. They were working for factories and things like that. And also, that's when the people that wasn't Caucasian and the women could step up then and take jobs. They could work in factories. They could do all kinds of things to help the war effort. And then they had more rights. They actually got to go into the workforce and get more rights and things like that. And that really started a lot of the movement of women getting to work in the workforce.
Right. Oh, yes. World War II was tremendous in the struggle for women's suffrage.
Yes.
And bringing that forward.
That's when you start seeing these bases pop up in Alabama where during the effort, we were trying to Air Force, the Maxwell Air Force Base was just used for the air support. You know, they made planes to go help with the air support in that, you know. Then on top of that, on that base, at Tuskegee, we had the Tuskegee Airmen, which was the first, they called it the Colored Guard, because that's what they called it, guys, in the military that would go and fight in the military. We also had at Tuskegee right there, and in Anniston, the WAPS, which is the Women Auxiliary Corps, Women's Auxiliary, Para-Auxiliary Corps. And these were women that wanted to serve in the military, right? They wanted to help with the war effort. And they trained the women there and sent them all over the world. And they were probably in like MASH units, or they were nurses, or they were, you know, they were just backup support. They weren't on the front lines, guys, not at this point, but they were in battle. They were in war, and they got to serve. And Alabama was on the forefront of that.
It's Alabama's rebel nature that made us such a great asset to the war. We saw as Alabamians that there was a direct threat to our freedoms.
Right on our border, because what happened, and this is where I'm, you know, proud Navy veteran here, I have to brag about the USS Alabama, about what happened during that time, right when this all started. And still, Alabama, we're here training people, we're doing the backup support, but we're not really directly feeling threatened right now. And then all of a sudden, a German U-boat shows up in the Gulf. And I'm talking about the Gulf of Mexico, guys, like down there, like y'all go to the beach and go swimming in Panama City in the Gulf shores. There was a U-boat out there, okay? We had to go get that U-boat out of our bay because they could do all kind of damage. Just like when Howard Hughes had to go, we can reference that, how Howard Hughes had to go help them get one off the West Coast. When you go back and watch my Eternal Legacy episode about Howard Hughes, I discussed how he went and helped the government himself off the West Coast of California to get the same thing, to take care of a German U-boat that was going up and down our coast. The USS Alabama left port in Mobile and went out there and got that U-boat. They don't say how, but they took care of it. And they come back, and that's when Alabama said, you know what? This is no longer a joke. They're on our borders, guys. They're coming up on our beach. They're going to storm us like Normandy. We got to do something. And I just want you to think about the nerve of that, guys. Like, that's twice now that we know about.
Right.
Right? Not counting what we probably don't know about. That German U-subs or U-boats got up right on our coast. And then we had to go run them off. Go on now. This ain't where you belong. Right? So, and I'm making light of it, but that's close, guys. That's too close for comfort. That's why we have the Navy.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash? Duck and cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
Fort McClellan and Maxwell Air Force Base
Yes.
were both bases during World War I. Both bases had relevance for many wars, at least that those parcels of ground where the bases were forts and all of this. And then we have, so at World War II, what ended up happening was the bases weren't big enough. And there was massive base construction going on. And we had to have people to do that. The only people left in this country to build stuff were people that weren't permitted to serve. So everything that was built during that time was built by someone that was not allowed to serve in the military.
Right, and didn't even have the same rights as the men that they were building it for. Let's go right here to this one.
All right. Most of the industrialization for this time took place in the cities. So one thing that was beneficial is a lot of people lost their jobs during the Great Depression. And they were able to replace those with new jobs. And that allowed Alabama to have the quick readiness that we needed to have the bases operational, like Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Fort McClellan in Anniston. And then one of the famous was the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, which later became part of NASA and the whole Nazi conspiracy with NASA, which goes into the Tuskegee Air Force Base.
Nearly 300,000 men in Alabama served under the war effort. This doesn't include the incredible number of women and the volunteers that we were just talking about that signed up for divisions, such as the Nurses Corps. And there was one example of David McCampbell was part of the Air Group 15, which served the USS Enterprise down in over 34 Japanese planes. His skills as an airman were top-notch. So they trained a lot of top-notch people here. And then one that I'm going to do an Eternal Legacy episode on is C. Alfred Chief Anderson, one of the most famous Tuskegee Airmen. He was the chief flight instructor for the Tuskegee Airmen. He wrote several race barriers in 1929. And when he earned his pilot's license, followed by the commercial pilot certification in 1932. And the story, interesting story about that is Eleanor Roosevelt was big on the front of the Tuskegee Airmen and getting them into the service, and the women. She was on the forefront of trying to give them rights to serve their country because they wanted to serve their country. So when she came down to the base, now remember guys, she was still First Lady at this point when this happened, what I'm going to tell you that what happened. So the story about her is, I love Eleanor Roosevelt for a lot of reasons, but this was one of the really good stories about her. So she came down to the base to see how it was going because she was on the forefront, like I said, of developing that. So she wanted to check it out. Well, she comes down here, of course, she's got her security guards and everybody around her. And so she tells the guy I was talking about, the Campbell guy, says, I want you to take me up in the plane. And he said, what? I want to go up in a plane with you. I want to see how you are as a pilot. I want to see your skills because everybody says you're great, you're the best, so take me up. And her security guard said, ma'am, we don't think that might be a good idea. We don't know if you should go up there. And she goes, I'm First Lady. If I want to go up in that plane, I'm going to go up in the plane. So he goes this way, like that quick, puts her in the plane, puts a helmet on her, goes up in the air. She comes back down. She said it was the most exhilarating ride of her life. Loved it. Loved the ride, loved the experience, loved him. She was all behind it. So I love her for that. It's that right. Kind of spirit.
And again, with the Tuskegee Airmen, just another area that shows how Alabama was pushing through our difficult, diverse times. Mm-hmm. And becoming a unified state, not just unified by the people, but unified by color and everything. We were all the same for just a brief moment, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
But during this time, it was, Alabama was such a pivotal hub for the training. Maxwell Air Force Base had special units that they were teaching.
Yes.
That was where your, what is that, like the Army Rangers and the Navy SEAL, that was those type of credentials, not necessarily those classes or categories of individuals, but those type of people were being trained there to do that. The espionage, what needed to be done to win this war effort against Nazi Germany.
Yeah, well, he's talking about, like with the Navy, that would be like the SEALs. With the Army, it would be like the Rangers. So they were more like special op groups that would go in small divisions at a time, 10 to 12 at a time. And they would probably be the first one behind enemy lines. They would be the scouts. They would also go in, like if there's just one subject, like one person back there you need to get, you don't want to hurt a lot of people, you don't want to cause a lot of ruckus, you send them in, they can get that one person, do their job, and get out without being seen. So they're specialized units that we were training.
This war story is about how Alabama handled the war. Mm-hmm. Not about World War II. World War II is huge and would take months to cover the whole thing. But the people of Alabama were quite amazing at this time. Many of the citizens worked and lived near the factories that were producing all of these items needed for the campaigns. And another very interesting thing with these folks is they participated in scrap drives.
Right.
Not like today where you see 100 people going, taking their scrap iron to pick up what they need to get through the day.
Oh, no, guys.
This was donated.
They were taking everything, going everywhere, pulling up everything to melt scrap, to make iron, and make supplies for that. Then on top of that, they were making victory gardens. Now, victory gardens, going to a victory garden.
What can we do to help win the war with food.
Victory gardens were great. So it was just a small plot of land. I think it was supposed to be like a 10 by 10 plot. And at this time, the government actually wanted to help people. You know, they didn't want to put GMOs in your food. They wanted to show you how to eat healthy and still keep your family moving. So the government actually provided people with a little plot. So if you do a 10 by 10 square and you plant these items and these can be crossed over, what it was supposed to do is give you enough food to last at least a full season. So if your entire fall, you would have something to eat. And a lot of people took that further where they would make their victory gardens, especially in the South, in Alabama. You can have a victory garden all year long. Anywhere from Gadsden south, you can have a year-round garden.
It's something that I was really proud of with the Alabamians, and we were talking about this being our contribution to the war. When they used to send out these little booklets, guys, and they were like things they wanted you to accomplish, or each state or each county to give, and they were requirements. It was like this, so much like steel needs to be given from this county. Let's just give a good example. We're from St. Clair County, so St. Clair County gets a list and says we need 2 tons of iron, we need 20 pounds of flour. We need this, we need this, we need this. And it could be different items, guys. But you know, Alabama was the only state at all that fulfilled those booklets every time they were sent out. Once a month now, these booklets were sent out. And once a month, Alabama fulfilled it. Never missed one, and always sent in what they were supposed to.
Well, one thing that throughout history, the southern states that you've learned is that southern people are willing to do without.
Yeah.
When it means fighting for the freedoms of the future
and the greater good.
And the greater good, for sure, Jennifer. Then the people of the South, they're willing to do without to make sure that their children and their grandchildren have in the future.
Because we do have a mentality of this is for all of us. It's not just for one of us. There's a Vulcan saying, right? If you ever watch Star Trek, the Vulcan saying, what does he say?
Just logical. The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Or the one.
So it's the reference guide to, it's talking about not looking at yourself, not being self-centered, not being selfish. Because would it be easier for them to just take care of themselves during that time? Yes, it would. Okay, but everybody out there, every citizen out there was involved with this somehow, whether they had family members in war, or whether they were working for the war effort. Everybody in Alabama was involved. And to me, when you come together as a people against, let's say like one common enemy comes against us, we're going to get together as a people and fight that common enemy, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing. You know, we were contributing as a people, as one, to an objective. I want to go look at this helicopter.
Okay. Before the Red Cross was corrupt, like they are today, they were really pushing into the war effort. The Red Cross took donations and put most of those donations back to the war effort. Unlike today, I think it's only like 15 or 20% of the money you give the Red Cross actually makes it to the cause.
I don't even want to go into the things I've seen.
People need to know the Red Cross charges cities that they go in and help. They charge Charlotte, but back then, before then, the Red Cross was providing a lot of help. They were making bandages, medical supplies. They were providing all of this based off of donations that they were receiving, as well as their own man hours to do this. And Alabama families even stepped up in other ways. It may not be your son or daughter over there, but they're getting a care package from you because you loved your soldiers so much. You would just send care packages, and you wouldn't address it to any one soldier. This is a care package for a soldier in the war. Get it to them, and that's what happened. A lot of soldiers on the battlefield would be surprised by a care package from some family.
They didn't even know in
Alabama.
Idaho somewhere.
Right.
That's because we all had that mentality then, didn't we? Of patriotism, of what it means to be a soldier, what it means to fight for your country and your people. We're not fighting for the president, guys. That's just who's in charge of the military by the rule standards. That's not why you would take a bullet I'm not
Yes.
going to take a bullet for a president. I will take a bullet for my country.
Right.
So it's different. What people get mixed up is different. I'm not fighting for Joe Biden. I'm not fighting for Donald Trump. I am fighting for the United States of America. I'm fighting for the beliefs that we have freedom, right? That we have choices, that we have love and family and unity. I'm fighting for those little children to have that when they grow up.
Right. And around the world today, the document that we have, our Constitution, we need to fight to keep it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But see, as our families were giving and giving and giving, well, around 1942, we started having major shortages.
Mm-hmm.
So not only were our families sending things overseas and care packages, they were having to do without at home.
Sacrificing
There
a
were
lot.
stamps for a lot of things.
You know, they said that the one ration book that they loved, that they wanted the most, was coffee and sugar, right? So that was the two most highly coveted items on those ration lists, because guys, they would send out this ration book and they would say, you only get 5 pounds of sugar for a month.
That was the whole thing with rationing. Families, you were allocated how much you were allowed to have, and then you couldn't have any more. So hopefully you had enough in your garden, your little victory garden, to supplement what you were allowed to buy. It didn't matter if you were a multi-millionaire at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You got 5 pounds of sugar.
That's what they don't understand too. I don't think y'all understand, guys. If we go to a war, or we're in such a war like that, they can turn around and still do that. That's in their power to say, okay, you're only getting 5 gallons of gasoline per car. I don't care what that takes you, how far that gets you down the road. This is it. This is all you get. And they can still do that. They can still ration us. They can still
they
cut
very
us
well
off.
easily could. But as I mentioned sugar a second ago.
I want you to look at this helicopter, guys.
Oh, that's a cool helicopter. That looks like a Vietnam helicopter there. The popular consensus as they were rationing items was sugar was the #1 missed item. Most people said that they could do without a lot of things, but sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And something as simple as going to the store and buying a little 5-pound bag of sugar today, you just couldn't do that.
Go ahead.
Now, Alabama had another role to play in this, and it's a role that I am not as happy about. I understand it. I do understand it, but I'm not happy about it. See, because Alabama had 4 major POW camps, and it was Ellisville, Opelika, Camp Rucker, and Fort McClellan. And that housed most of them. All right, that was your 4 major. There was several smaller camps around.
Wait a second. I have a question. You said that we had POW camps in the United States?
Yes. Yes, they would bring prisoners of war over to the United States to imprison them.
So we had internment camps here.
Yes, and some people were released from internment camps and hired by government institutions in this country.
Thus NASA's born.
That was one of them. But yes. And if you guys want a whole conspiracy story on that,
I will cover that.
We'll give you a conspiracy story. Comment below though, because there's a lot of research that goes into that one. But anyways, so during World War II, we had these POW camps, but there was also other camps. There were, for lack of a better word, it was Americanized concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing, if you go on a Google and do a Google search, you will see Japanese internment camps all over, where the United States rounded up the Japanese people, Japanese citizens, because the United States at that time felt and thought that, well, they might be spies.
More than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. 2/3 of them American citizens. 1/3 aliens. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous. Most were loyal. But no one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shores.
But what was the difference between the Alabama POW camps and theirs? And I can give you one example. We didn't just leave them locked up in a POW camp. We gave them an option. You know, I was always raised and taught, give someone an option. Well, they told the prisoners, if you want to come out and work the farms with us and help us contribute to the war effort, we'll let you out. And then we'll just bring you back every evening. But you get all day out on the farm and we'll feed you and we'll take care of you. And then you're still a prisoner of war, but you don't have to be sitting in that bunk all day. If I was them, I would go, I'll take the job on a farm.
One thing that they don't tell you is that in addition to the Japanese Americans, German Americans were put into these camps, and members of my family in the Italian community were put into this camp because of Mussolini. So there was a lot of prejudice at that time against Japanese, Italians, and Germans that had been in this country for years. As a matter of fact, my descendants left Italy after World War I to come here to make a better life for themselves. And what the United States did at that time, when they would go into someone's home, like my family, for instance, the story that's been handed to me was there was a knock on the door. Next thing you know, every exit to the house was surrounded. They gathered the family, told them nothing, put them in a truck, took them to a camp with nothing, and left them there.
It's horrible.
And then when the war was over and they were released, most of their homes were already sold. Someone else was living there. They had nothing.
They had nothing.
They had to start completely over. But you don't hear the Japanese, you don't hear the Germans, and you don't hear the Italians bitching about it today because they took it in stride and they did what they had to do to make a good life for them and their families in America. We'll go down here and check this tank out. Yeah, I've been looking at this tank.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
You know, that's something else I would love to actually get in a tank and drive. I know I said something in the Jennifer's Eternal Legacy with Howard Hughes. I mentioned I'd love to get in a cockpit, but man, I'd love to get behind or inside a tank. What do you call? I don't know if they have wheels or sticks. Or
they
whatever
said in Anniston there's a place that you can go and drop tanks.
We should see if we could do that. Maybe film that for everyone here. But
yeah, look at that.
You know, I got to tell everyone that the war had long-lasting effects on Alabama. It helped the state develop the economic, social, and cultural changes that are definitely relevant today in the state. Again, I know we still have a long ways to go. The strides we have made from World War II all the way through and past the civil rights movements to today, I know that we're definitely on a great course, and if we all put our minds to it, we can get a whole lot better. But World War II, I mean, it was an industrial revolution for the South. It made Birmingham a great steel producer again, and that lasted up until the 80s, 90s, when steel production all went overseas to the Japanese. Jimmy Carter, excuse me. But, you know, the economy in Alabama, it was the neatest thing, because before World War II, Alabama's economy was based on agriculture. Wheat, cotton, corn. After World War II, we became an industrialized people.
We sure did. Look at Birmingham, it's all industry.
We lost a lot of our heritage. We've lost a lot that many of us as Alabamians should hold dear. But I guess it's a trade that you have to make to grow and develop in this world. You have to lose certain traditions.
Right, or let go of certain things to move forward to get other things.
Exactly.
To grow.
You know, the war taught Alabama that all of its people are valuable. Not any one group or any one sex. All of its people are valuable.
Right, and that we should all be patriotic to each other, to our country. It doesn't matter, guys, if you like politics or if you like the president. We're not asking you to like the president. We're not saying vote Republican or vote Democratic. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about the love, the deep-rooted love for your country and your people. And that means all people, all American citizens that are here and living here.
That's right.
All right? We're all one people.
War never leaves a country whole, not even a state. Sometimes you wonder if the men and women lost to war is ever worth the cost. We live on the blood spilt by those before us. It's our job to make sure their lives were not spent in vain. Guys, this has been another war story. You have a great time, and we'll see you again. And I'm